and this is Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline. I'm your host, Monica Hadley, and with me is my co-host and mother, Caroline Kilborn.
We actually do have listeners from beyond, don't we?
Well, not from the great beyond, but from a little beyond.
Well, yeah.
Who knows? We might have some from the great beyond, too. Don't really know what they're listening to. That kind of fits right in with our with our story today, doesn't it?
It does.
So, Mom, who do we have on Writers' Voices today?
Well, today we have Linda Stasi, the popular and well-read columnist for the New York Daily News and previously for the New York Post. She has also been an on-camera TV co-host with Mark Simone for the past 18 years on NYI Spectrum's What a Week. And what a week this has been. Okay, she was named one of the 50 most powerful women in New York City. It doesn't say when, but I would like to know when that was and what that entails, and we can ask her that when we get going here. She has won numerous awards, of course, and this book is amazing. You will not be able to put it down because you want to see what happens. You really do.
The Book of Judas. Will the discovery of the missing pages of an ancient book mean the end of the world? And this is a thriller.
Yes, it is. It is.
And Linda's first novel, The Sixth Station, came out in 2013 and was also a religious thriller. And welcome to Writers' Voices, Linda.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So let's start out with when were you named one of the 50 most powerful women in New York City, and are you still?
I didn't think I was then. Well, I don't think I am now. I think it was around 2014 or 15. I don't know. It sounds ridiculous, but I don't keep track of stuff like that. It's just one of those things. It was very nice, but my family still is screaming for dinner.
Right.
Didn't change anything.
Good point. Why do you think you were chosen?
I have no idea. I mean, I was just a columnist at the Daily News, and it was a reader thing where they just asked readers to vote, as well as, influence makers, or as we call them now, influencers. And my name was there, so there it was. I can't imagine why, but there it was. I mean, I'm not being modest. I'm really supposed to. What?
And what did you get out of winning this award?
More work.
Figures.
I mean, it was just one of those. It was just, I got the privilege and the honor of putting it down on backs of books, and
so that we get to ask you, and you get to feel embarrassed. So, Linda, you've been a columnist for a long time. What do you write about in the newspaper world?
Well, I'm a news columnist, so I riff off of the news. And interestingly enough, before, when I started out in the business, I was a gossip columnist and became very friendly with Donald Trump, who is now the President of the United States. And as a matter of fact, he did come to my last book party. So, this is the conundrum, and I mentioned this in the new Book of Judas book. That's the conundrum of the columnist. If one of your friends is in the news and they've done something you disagree with, you cover for them? Do you know you're going to lose a friendship by telling the truth? What do you do? So wow. I do what I've always done, and I told the truth, and yes, I lost a friend. So
wow. Now in the book,
I can't live with myself. And I certainly can't live without a job, and, I have to tell the truth.
Right.
That's what columnists are supposed to do.
Right.
We're supposed to tell the truth. And when I first wrote something that Donald didn't like, there's a funny story. I had just had foot surgery, and I was in the doctor's office, and my phone buzzed, and I looked at it, and it said Donald Trump, and I thought, get the stitches out without anesthesia, or talk to Donald, because I had just written something I knew he wouldn't like. And I'm like, doctor, come and take the stitches out. So I didn't take the call. I called him when I got home, and he was not a happy guy.
Wow. Now, in the book, like you said, your character Alexandra, is a reporter. She's an investigative reporter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Is that something that you have some experience with?
Yes, I've been an investigative reporter. If you're a columnist, every story you do has to be investigated. You can't just take something at somebody's word, and it's the whole business has so changed in the last 4 years with a 24/7 news cycle and fake news, and people taking rumor and innuendo as fact.
Mm-hmm. I'll bet.
What people don't understand when they say, "Oh, you guys are all fake news." No, we're not fake news. Legitimate news sources aren't fake news because we get vetted by lawyers. We get looked at by editors. We can't just make up stuff or go with rumor and innuendo. Unfortunately, rumor and innuendo often trumps, no pun intended, the truth of stories, and they become the truth in people's minds. And there's no recourse because what are these people going to do? Sue some little guy sitting in his basement making up stories?
Well, that's a good point.
Very good, yes.
Yeah.
No,
they have nothing to lose.
There's no recourse.
Yeah.
They can just do it. We can't do it.
Right.
So who's not telling the truth? The little guy sitting in his basement?
I know.
Is making up a story about a protest, or us who has to go to the protest and look at it and talk to people and take the pictures with a photographer.
Yeah, I'm always puzzled at people who will believe alternative news sources that they have no way of knowing who it is really or what their agenda is. And they'll believe that over the mainstream media that, like you said, has to answer to somebody.
Right.
And
we have to answer to lawyers.
Yeah.
We have to answer to our readers. We can't just make stuff up. And it's interesting that it was Fox News who really coined the term mainstream media. Well, you can't get more mainstream than they are. They're the biggest cable news network.
That is true.
So it's just so funny that we get excoriated for being the mainstream media.
Well, long before the term fake news came up,
Right.
People around here that I know referred to Fox News as faux news.
As what news?
Faux, F-A-U-X.
Oh, faux news.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That's funny.
So in the book of Judas, Alexandra Russo is your main character, and this is her second book, right?
Yes.
And she is a reporter.
Yes.
And she has a friend who becomes part of the news, like you mentioned.
Right.
And it seems like you really have, you are really dealing with this 24/7 news cycle in this book, because as soon as she learns about what's going on with her friend, it's like she posts it online right away. And everybody seems to think this is fine. I mean, it doesn't bother him. It doesn't, she didn't seem to have any real second thoughts about that. Just jumping right into making him, into him being the story.
Well, he actually called her knowing it would be a story. So she was careful in what she said. But then the story goes further when other people immediately jump on the story and her boss wants her to do stuff that she doesn't really want to do because he is her friend. But that's the reporter's conundrum. And what I've said to people when I've gotten a tip, whether it's somebody I know or whether it's somebody I don't know, is that I can only promise you that if you tell me the story, I will get your side out.
Right.
There.
Right.
And if you don't tell me the story and if somebody else gets it, you're not guaranteeing that. I am guaranteeing that I will tell the truth.
To me,
you might not like the truth, but I'm going to tell the truth, and I'm going to tell your side of it, which is the way you're supposed to tell a story. And that's what Alessandra Russo does in this book. It's her best friend, but she tells the truth.
To me, investigative journalists it requires so much bravery, so much courage.
Yeah, for sure. I
mean, I'm a type of person that I'm a little timid about approaching somebody and asking them questions. Other than in this format, I'm fine with it. But to just like go up to somebody and start asking them questions, particularly someone in authority, that's hard for me.
Well, it's it's not easy, but, it's easier than being unemployed. And, I did a story 2 years ago that I'm most proud of. I found out through my book editor, actually, the man who edited Book of Judas, that there was a woman, a nun, and he told me that she was imprisoned in a men's prison in Brooklyn, New York, in a federal penitentiary that housed terrorists, mass murderers, and they had no room, so they made one floor where they imprisoned these women. And she was an 84-year-old nun who was imprisoned because she broke into a nuclear facility to prove how easy it was and how unprotected our nuclear facilities were. So he said, well, the thing is, she's in one room with 50 women. I said, well, that's not even true. He said, no, it's true. I said, it's not true. This is the United States of America. They don't put 50 women in one room to sleep and eat and use the bathroom. He said, it's true. So I attempted to go see her, and because I'm a journalist, I was rejected. So I used my former married name, and I was allowed in. And it was exactly as she said. Not that I got to see the room because we were forbidden to go in there. But this nun told me that she was in this room with 50 women, and all their bunks were in that same room. They had no privacy. They weren't allowed out in the sunlight because it was a men's prison, and their food was brought in there, and even the bathroom was even in the same room.
Oh.
And I thought, this
wow.
is insane. This is insane. She's an 84-year-old woman, and I took on the feds with this, and she was released. That's
wow.
my proudest story, and it was scary because, you're taking on the federal government.
Yeah.
Well, I'm amazed that they released her. I mean, I think that's wonderful. But
what did you actually have to do to make it happen, and how long did it take?
I wrote the truth of the story. It became a front-page story. Then everybody started picking it up, and then a bunch of female federal judges from an organization went to visit the prison, and they were appalled by what they saw. So the first thing they did is they divided the women into 35 in one room and 25 or whatever it was in another room. It's still insane. Insane.
Yeah.
And finally, they released her, and now they're looking into getting these women out of there. I mean, it's a men's federal lockup.
Wow.
There are women's federal prisons, aren't there?
Yeah, there are
just
women's
this floor
prisons.
with women that was put in a few years ago because there was no room for them. So they just cut out a floor and put these women there, all in one room, without facility to go outside. Once you're in there, you do not see the light of day.
Wow.
Because you can't be put in a yard where men are.
Yeah.
So these terrorists that are in there, convicted terrorists that are in there, get a cell to themselves or two people in a cell, and they get to play basketball and go outside. These women are stuck in this room 24/7 for their entire incarceration.
Wow.
It's insane. So that was
it is.
taking on the federal government.
Wow.
That was kind of scary, but the truth was more important than the scary.
You're listening
I'm sure
to.
you'd do the same thing. How could you not?
Right.
But a lot of people would just turn away, would just say, "Well, it's not my problem."
But it is.
I know.
It's everybody's problem. That this is being done is everybody's problem.
That's right.
That's how I feel, anyway.
No, you're right.
So, Linda, what attracted you to writing religious thrillers?
Oh, certainly not me. It came from somewhere else. I am a very spiritual person. Always have been since I was a child. I'm also somewhat very psychic. Have been since I was a child. I don't cotton to any particular organized religion, but God is all around me, or whatever, and So I'm always aware of signs, but I was so relieved because I spoke to you guys the last time when I wrote The Sixth Station and how all those signs manifested themselves to me, and I just couldn't help but to write this thing, even though it took me forever. Through 6 countries, road tripping with an exorcist priest from the Vatican, climbing 2 mountains. So I was exhausted after that one, and I thought, okay, not again. Never doing this again. This is nonsense. I'm never doing this again. And I was so happy. We had this house at the beach, which soon was about to get hit by Sandy, but Hurricane Sandy. But I was laying on the couch, so relieved not to be writing any more books. And I look up on the bookshelf, and there in front of me is this book called I, Judas by Taylor Caldwell. And I thought, the heck is that? Never seen that before. I've had this house for 12 years. How could I not have seen this book? So I pulled the book down, and it was an old hardcover, and it was written in 1977. No one in my family brought it there. No one knew where it came from. Nobody had seen it before. So it was just one of those things. So I start reading, and I thought, well, this is interesting. So then 3 days later, my daughter and I took a trip to Princeton, New Jersey. It was like a girls' getaway weekend. And because my daughter is a kind of real pain in the butt, we had to go to the Princeton bookstore instead of just getting spa treatments all day, which is my idea of going away. So we went to the Princeton bookstore. And there, sitting on the front table, is a book called The Gospel of Judas as Interpreted by Elaine Pagels. And I thought, what the hell? That's pun intended. That's 2 Judas warnings in 3 days, or sightings in 3 days. So I said, well, I have to buy this book. So I'm reading this book, and Elaine Pagels is a noted religious scholar at Princeton, and I'm reading this book, and she says in there that there was this Gospel of Judas that was found in Almenia, Egypt in the 1970s. And that it kicked around the black market for many years. Nobody was buying it. And it was this 2,000-year-old written in Aramaic, in ancient Aramaic, on papyrus, and it was dated to 2,000 years. And that it was supposedly the words that Jesus imparted to Judas about betraying him and how he needed to be betrayed. And it's I'll tell you that in a minute. But I thought, well, and so she's saying how it kicked around the black market for all these years. And then she says it ended up rotting in a safety deposit box in the little town of Hicksville, Long Island. Well, I grew up in Hicksville, Long Island. So I thought, oh, no. And then it says in a safety deposit box in the Citibank branch on Broadway in Hicksville, Long Island. Guess what?
That was your bank.
That was my parents' bank, and it was my first bank that I ever had a bank account in. So to paraphrase Rick in Casablanca, of all the banks in the world, you let it show up in mine. So I thought, oh, damn, here we go again. So of course I had to write it. What was the choice?
So it really is true that this gospel was found, that this papyrus was found in the 70s, and that it got lost or got put in this bank. And then what happened to it?
So once it was discovered, well, it was sold to this man who had possession of it. Was this black marketeer, and he had a tip that the Columbia University might buy it. So he took it to Columbia University, but he put such a high price tag on it that they said no, which is interesting because it's probably the most important relic of our time. And so he just said he was a black marketeer, but he was a peasant. He wasn't an educated man. And it was the first time he'd ever been on a plane. So he just gave it to his relatives who had family in Long Island. And he just said, oh, take it off my hands. And they stuck it in this safety deposit box. And then nobody looked at it again. And when it was finally found by another black marketeer, 17 years later, it had moldered into a bazillion pieces. So some of the pages were still intact, and he took those pages and stuck them in a freezer, so it really rotted beyond belief. And then when it was finally found and negotiated the price by National Geographic, they managed to put together what was left of it by taking a photo of each little tiny piece of the thousands and thousands of pieces, and then tried to put those photos together in some sort of, like a puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's just amazing that a 2,000-year-old
Well, first of all, how does it
would just be left to rot.
How does it survive in wherever it was for 2,000 years and then fall apart in a safe deposit box? Is it just
Because
the moisture?
it was in a sealed clay jar.
Okay.
Just like the Nag Hammadi Bibles and the Nag Hammadi Gospels and the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're in the desert. They're buried underground and in caves in sealed clay jars in the desert.
Okay.
It's enough to the air there keeps it forever. Because there's nothing to mold, there's no mold, there's no mildew, there's no way for it to rot.
So
And it was in a cave, so it was kept cool but dry. So it was perfect conditions. So that these other scholars had gotten a glimpse of it sometime in the 70s. They had seen it, and it was in perfect condition, but they didn't buy it either.
why did nobody want to buy it? I mean,
Beats me. I think that, I had, if you've ever been to the Middle East, there's such a giant amount of relics everywhere, real, fake, everything. At one time in like the 1930s, when they had started digging up all the Egyptian tombs, there were so many mummies dug up that they couldn't dispose of, that they were using them as fuel in the trains.
Oh.
They were using the mummies like coal in trains. That's how many there were.
Oh, my gosh.
So I think even in the 70s, there was still a huge amount of relics flying around in the black market and elsewhere, and there just wasn't the interest that there should have been. It's a disgrace.
I mean, people must not have believed it was real, because if they thought it was real,
who saw it from various universities when they all met in this one place where this black marketeer had it, and he let them look at it for a second before they said it was real. They all knew it was authentic, and Columbia University said it was authentic when they saw it.
wow. And yet, okay, so if you're asked too high a price and you get turned down, then you negotiate the price. You don't just stick it in a safe deposit box and go home.
That's what he did. Unbelievable, but that's what he did. He stuck it in a safety deposit box and then went back to Egypt, never to see it again.
Now, the Book of Judas, your story is based on the concept that several pages of it had been put somewhere else for safekeeping, and now they've come to light.
Right.
Is that rumored to have happened? Is there any evidence for that?
It is rumored.
Okay.
It was rumored at the time, and it's still out there because it was moldered. The thing had been rotted into so many thousands and thousands of pieces that they don't know if pages are missing or if just whole sections are missing, but they think there were about 3 or 4 more pages that weren't there.
So, in the part that they recreated, did it say anything that people took people by surprise? That anything important?
Yes. What I discovered. Well, I discovered a few things. The first thing that stood out to me, and it was never mentioned in any of these interpretations, was that while the other Gospels are telling of what happened, Jesus went here, he said this, there were that many people, he turned the loaves and fishes, this one is all esoteric information, spiritual information that Jesus supposedly imparted to Judas. And he said to him, "You will be the most hated man in history, but you must do this for me, because without the crucifixion there can be no resurrection. And I broke a code, I believe, in that was in there all the while, because Jesus apparently, the code that I seem to have broke, is saying, he says, I come from the realm of Barbello, and he explains what this realm is, and we might call it heaven, but after I broke down exactly word for word what it was, he's referring to the star system Sirius. Now, the star system Sirius is the place that many people from the beginnings of time, the Sumerians, for example, believed that life began from the star system Sirius. The Dogon tribe in Mali knew for hundreds and hundreds of years that the star system Sirius had two revolving moons, the suns around the star, that could not be seen. They were not discovered until the 1970s, and they said that that's where life began.
Wow.
And I found that really interesting. And there's also this theory of panspermia, which is that if say a comet or lands on the Earth, that it has germs in it. Maybe that's where it started. Oh, very, very interesting. And I delved into this, and I went into some pretty dark, crazy places, literally and figuratively researching it. I took out all my investigative skills, and then I said, okay, I got all this. Now, how do I create a story around it? Because and I'm glad it's written in a fiction format, because it's so fantastical that people will think I'm crazy.
So
now, to that before. So
now the things that kind of the dangers that Alexandra gets into investigating these lost pages. Are you saying that some of those things actually happened?
Yes. Well, they happened especially when I was investigating the Sixth Station. But with this one, I traveled to Israel, and I went to visit some of my husband's very distant relatives. By very distant, I mean it's his sister's husband's distant relatives, so it's pretty distant. But I'd heard that they were mystics and Kabbalists and spiritual healers, and so I thought, I really need to go meet these people. I have a feeling that my story is going to lead me there. So I went, and I found myself deep in the desert in Israel at this relative's place, and I pull up, and it's deep in the desert, but they have this beautiful house in the desert, and all around it are digs, because everywhere you go in the desert of Israel, there's digs. And interestingly, the second I walked in the house, all the lights went out.
Oh, boy.
And so we were looking at, they're both artists, and I was trying to see their paintings and whatnot. It's kind of dark, but there's a lot of windows, so I could see they were doing some beautiful stuff. And then the husband says to me, listen, come on down, let me show you the basement. Now, when anybody in my family ever says that, it's like, oh, here we go to the finished basement, they must have the built-in bar. Except when somebody says that in Israel, you end up in a 3,000-year-old burial tomb.
Oh.
Yeah, we walked downstairs with candles because the lights had burned out, and under their house, they had dug, about 10 years ago, they found a tomb, which was a burial tomb that was 3,000 years old, and it still had the shelves in it and everything where what they would do is lay out bodies, and the bodies would rot, and then they would put them into the estuary jars. And that's what this was. And there was a tunnel that they dug that led into it, and that's where I got that whole section of my book. I mean, it existed. It exists. It exists.
Wow.
And the chances, if I hadn't done that, I couldn't have made that up.
No.
How do you make something like that up?
Really?
So I left the house after several hours of being completely blown away. I left the house. The second I walked out of the house, all the lights went on.
Okay. Okay. Wow. How is writing, you say you do as much investigation on these novels as you do on your columns, but how is the writing process different?
Somebody once said, dying is easy, writing comedy is hard. Well, to me, investigating is easy. Making up fiction is hard. I can tell a story, but it's very difficult for somebody who spends their lives writing the truth to create fiction. So the writing process is totally different, because especially if, for me, I'm a tabloid reporter, and somebody can call me up and say, listen, I just found the cure for cancer, and I'll say, hurry up, I got 5 minutes to write this, and I got 15 inches, so make it quick. We're used to taking the truth and making it as succinct and brief as possible. When you write a novel, you're taking the smallest thing and expanding it to as long as possible. So you have to describe, if somebody's walking on the sidewalk, what does that sidewalk look like? Are there cracks? Are there gum? Is there gum there? Are there footprints? Is it wet? Is it dry? Is it made of concrete? Is it made of blocks? So those are things you don't write in a news story.
Mm.
And all of those things have to be thought of, gotten into, and that's why I really admire fiction writers who can do that without traveling to a place. But I need to actually go to that place. I need to smell the fruit. I need to smell the air. I need to see what's growing there. I need to see what the people are wearing. I need to hear the noise. Is it quiet? Is there a huge amount of noise? Are people playing music? Are they quietly meditating? Are they firing guns? Whatever it is, I need to be there.
So you've gone to every place, every setting in your book? You've been there?
Every setting in all my books, yes.
In all your books, wow.
Wow.
Well, I could see that could take a lot of time.
It does, but even tabloid reporters get vacation. We're allowed to leave sometimes. And I've been to some crazy places and done some crazy things. Now, originally when I planned this book, I was going to go to Almenia, Egypt, where this gospel had originally been found. And then it turns out that I wasn't allowed to go because the Muslim Brotherhood, they had found 300 Muslim Brotherhood that were about to be executed by the government, so they weren't allowing Americans to travel there. And then I said, okay, switch of plans. I'm going to go to Mali, where the Dogon tribe is, who had discovered the star system Sirius. I'm going to go there. And then it turns out the Ebola broke out. And I was told by the American embassy not to go there unless I was under armed escort. And so I managed to get an armed escort, but then the government said, no, we really don't want you to go. We're taking back the idea of the armed escort. You're not going. We can't have you bringing back Ebola. So that was that.
Wait a minute.
So
you were willing to
change it to Israel.
You were willing to go there with an armed escort?
Sure.
Wow.
Why wouldn't you?
I don't know.
Don't answer that. Why would anybody? The question really should be
why would anybody?
Right?
Yeah, really. You're listening to Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline, and our guest today is Linda Stasi, author of Book of Judas. Linda, why don't you read a little bit from the Book of Judas?
Because let me get it. I'm sitting in the newsroom and I don't have.
Oh, you don't have it with you. Okay,
well, get it up for you.
Okay, all right. Well, while you're doing that,
okay, let me hold on 1 second.
Okay. Wow. So, yeah, this book really does grab you, doesn't it, Mom?
Yeah, it does, and we're not going to tell the ending because that's the whole thing. But it's really interesting. there's so many different characters and people in it that, from different countries and in different cultures and everything, and that's what makes it interesting.
And it's fascinating that it's all, based, there's so many elements of truth underlying the story.
Exactly.
So that's what makes it really fascinating.
Well, that's what was fascinating for me, because I promise you I didn't want to get involved in this. It was the last thing I wanted to do. But the more I got involved with it, the more I found that it was a story that needed to be told, and I felt like I'd been forced to tell this story. So, do you want me to read some?
Yes, please do.
How much do you want me to read?
About 7 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll get a nice good chunk here.
Okay, I hope I can read the first line without getting thrown off the air.
Oh yeah,
the son of a bitch is dead.
Yeah.
Want to get drunk? It was my pal Roy on the other end. What? Hammered? Roy. You sound like you've gone nuts? Yeah, nuts, he answered, barely suppressing a laugh. Roy had been my best friend since high school. Death wasn't something he usually took lightly, especially not since 9/11, when he'd lost so many of his firefighter buddies. Who's dead? Seriously, Russo? Wait, let me take this off speaker. I'm in the newsroom, as I am now. I said, wondering who and what he was talking about. I don't care. I want the world to know. Ding dong, the son of a bitch is dead. Oh my God, your father? He died? I asked, trying to keep my voice controlled. Finally. I'm so sorry. I mean, I know he was horrible to you, but your attitude is, you sound like a girl, he said, which he knew would rile me up because I like to think of myself as a woman who's tough as any guy. The soldiers I was embedded with in Iraq used to say I could take it like a man, and I can. I answered his poke with one of my own. You should show some respect for the dead, Roy boy. You mean the same kind of respect dead Morris always showed me? Roy's dad, Morris Golden, had always been an abusive brute to his wife and to his son. His abuse got even worse, if possible, after he found out that his hero firefighter son was gay. He could no longer beat him. Roy had become a big strapping man, but verbal abuse from a parent can be a punch to the gut at any age. Geez, you didn't kill him or anything? I asked, a little panicked now. Silence. Roy, did you kill him? What he said was, have you ever heard such great news on such a winter's day? It's spring. It is? Shut up and stop being an ass. I'm sorry about your dad, Roy. I mean that. But seriously, I'm concerned. He cut me off. Roy was trying to string me along, which had been our pattern since we were little kids. But this was no time for games. It was late. I was late for the news meeting, but I was equally concerned that Roy had finally snapped and killed the old bastard. This is not the attitude I expect from my oldest friend, he mock-sighed. Elation, unmitigated joy, pissing your pants happy, all good. Feeling sorry that he's dead? Not so good, he said instead. Roy cut it out and answered me. How did he die? Tell me, you didn't kill him. That's 2 questions, and you yourself, Allie, didn't answer my first one. Do you want to go get drunk? Getting more concerned by the second and losing my patience with his games, it took a lot for me to lose my patience with Roy. He was the one person, besides my oldest girlfriend, Donna, to whom I allowed this kind of flack. I sucked it up and said, I'll ask you one more time, buddy, did you kill your father? Nope. I wanted to, but I didn't. He called, I went over, dead. Just then a copy kid started hovering around my desk. Allie, the meeting's starting in 5, he said. Then the editor said, get your ass in there before, and he means it. I gave him a look, learned at my mother's knee that could scare a Taliban leader out of his sunglasses. It seemed to scare whatever courage he had left, and he ran right out too. I didn't say that. Mr. Brandt did, the kid choked out. He said, to quote him exactly, okay, I snapped, but as you can see, I'm very busy on the phone here. It's a source. Tell that to Mr. Brandt. Now the kid looked like he might projectile vomit. I brushed him away, warning, go ahead, tell him. You can't be timid in a game like this, kiddo. Get moving. Apparently, 22-year-old males have no understanding of the dangers of continually poking sleep-deprived, water-retaining new mothers who also happen to be dealing with a friend who sounded like he was on the edge. Back on the phone, Roy was still talking, saying, I've been called a lot of things in my time, but a source? Soused, yes. A source? No. But How did he die? I repeated. Here, ask him, he said. He's right here in the house, where I'm waiting for the coroner. Geez, Roy, you're in your old house in Hicksville, just sitting there with your dead father? Yeah, it's like a pre-Shiva, with the dead guy present, and without the snacks or the crowds. Not that this old crow will have anybody to mourn him, or that I'll even sit Shiva, but I'm always up for some nice hamantaschen and a nice pound cake. The copy kid came back from the conference room, hovering again like a fly on bad meat. I said I'll be right in, damn it. The kid turned on his heels and scooted away just as the HR lady walked by. She gave me the look that said, we don't speak to other employees like that. I wanted to tell her to drop dead, but we don't speak to other employees like that. We used to all the time. It's a newsroom, for God's sake, not a yoga retreat. But even we reporters are now supposed to be civil. What is this world coming to? Roy, I gotta go, and please, go wait outside or something. Don't just sit there with your dead father. Outside and give up the comfort of the living room? Or maybe I should call the dead room now. Oh, God, you're in the living room with the corpse? For God's sakes, Roy. Hey, this is a long time coming. Let me enjoy the moment, will you? Oh, that's rough, even from you. And by the way, how did he die again? Once again, he ignored me, my question, and chirped, yep, me and dead Pops. We're in the living room, and I'm staying right here. I want to make sure he's really dead. You're a sick bastard. See you tonight. We'll celebrate, he asked, as though I hadn't just called him that. All right, I said. I'll meet you tonight if I can get a sitter. As I sort of mentioned, I was now the proud, reed-harried, single mom of a 6-month-old bouncing baby boy named Pantera Russo, or Terry for short, because as my mother reminded me daily, Pantera is no name for a child. I'll drive into the city, Roy said. Got the old man's car, or should I say the old man's old car? Not the 85 Buick, none other. What do you say we meet at El Quijote, 7-ish? Ish, and if I can get a sitter. I'll text you. Got to run or I'll get fired, I said, while running to the conference room, cell phone to my ear. You're a Pulitzer Prize winner. They can't fire you. Actually, I never won. Bye. Oh, Russo? What? Please, honey, I'm late for the morning news meeting. I forgot to tell you something. I know you're in a bad way, but I will be too in about 30 seconds if I don't get there. I remember I was standing in the Standard's newsroom just under the big screen that digitally flashed the headlines right next to the ancient clock that didn't do anything much. You tend to remember things like that when your life changes forever. He couldn't be stopped. Just listen to this one last thing he said. Sounding what? Desperate, excited? On his deathbed, yep, the deathbed confession really does happen. Even though it was last night and I didn't know he was dying, Roy continued, somewhat out of breath. Oh, Morris? He grabbed my hand, my good beer mug hand at that, in his bony mitt and said, son, like the old bastard ever called me anything but useless, son, I need to tell you I stole something. Yeah, like what, my childhood? I told him so. He squeezed my hand like he wanted to break it, which he probably did, and wheezed out, stop whining, useless. I swear he said that. Then he said, what I stole were some pages, a codex. When I was the bank manager, he called it the Judas Bible or something that had been left in a safety deposit box in a branch in Hicksville, Long Island. He claims he only stole some pages because he wanted to save them from rotting. Wait a damn minute, I said. I remember that. Well, not all of it was found then, my father told me. He said he stole it way back in the 1980s or something. Then he sealed it up in a brass tube in the house. How many pages did he steal? He didn't say. But why those particular pages, at least? Yeah, well, he said he stole the pages that revealed Jesus' secret to resurrection. Like Jesus' resurrection was nothing but a magic trick, he spat out with disgust. I felt like I'd have to clean my phone receiver. Roy's Jewish faith was solid, but he'd always been a real soft spot for Jesus. Thought he was a cool dude. His words, not mine. I sincerely doubt that if that were the case, he would have chosen somebody else. Oh, by the way, he said the resurrection pages, or whatever the hell they are worth, pause, $10 million.
Whoa. And that is Linda Stasi reading from Book of Judas, a novel, a thriller. And I have to ask, is Alexandra Russo coming back after this adventure?
Oh, God, don't even ask me. I can't go to any more exotic places. Although I did just go to Peru and Bolivia to see the things that couldn't have been built by humans, so I think there is another book there.
I think there probably is.
I think there might be a movie in this one.
Oh, I hope so. Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't it, though? That'd be a great movie.
if I mentioned this to you the last time, but when I first my agent was first out selling the first book. Believe it or not, in this day and age, female editors were saying to my agent, "Can't she make her 25 years old? I mean, she's 42 years old. That's too old." What?
Oh my!
This is from other women. And can't she? Why does she have to be eating all the time? Can't she just be a little chicer? No, she's a real person. She's a real woman, and I'm really proud that I made her a real woman and a protagonist that's strong and tough and vulnerable, and somebody that other women and men, I believe, can relate to, because she's real. Well, she's real to me.
She seems pretty real to me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, she does through the whole book, and I mean, just her interaction with her neighbors, and that couple, and oh gosh, and her baby. I mean, that's just creepy.
Everybody, and we're not going to say what that thing is, but anybody who's pre-read it says to me, "I can't sleep. You made me not sleep that far with the baby."
Yeah, I know.
So, does this bank branch still exist?
Yes, it does.
And
it's not the old stone one from when I was a kid. It's been rebuilt into something ugly, but still exists.
Wow. And the missing pages are maybe still out there somewhere.
Yes, they might still be out there. We don't know. Wow. The only person who might know is who's ever got them. Otherwise, no one knows.
Yeah.
They didn't surface when Nat Geo was doing. Nat Geo spent millions of dollars trying to put this thing together, and they had a special about it, and it was in the magazine and everything. But I'm very interested with the fact that nobody did come forward, but more importantly that all these scholars were so busy interpreting it literally that nobody understood that if in fact it's true, or whether Judas made this up. I find it hard to believe that Judas would have made this up, because how could he know about star systems? I mean, he was a peasant in 2,000 years ago in the desert. He wasn't an educated man. I find it very interesting that all the scholars that then interpreted it, nobody saw the spiritual aspects of it. They seemed to just think it was the rantings of a crazy man. And nobody thought to say, well, every other gospel is just like a travelogue. Jesus went here, he did this, he did that. And also what I found especially interesting when I really got into reading about it, there's no reason on earth, think about this, that Judas would ever have had to betray the whereabouts of Jesus. Jesus was the most popular man in Jerusalem, the most famous man. He announced where he was having dinner when it turned out to be the Last Supper, the Seder dinner. He announced where he was sleeping all the time. That's like saying, Elvis was in town and somebody would have to tell the cops where he was.
Yeah. That's true.
He was the most famous man. He rode into Jerusalem on not one but two donkeys on his way from having dinner with the man he resurrected from the dead, who had at his home the town bad girl who massaged Jesus' feet with thousands of dollars worth of precious oils. Everything he did was like a big event. So not only would he have never had to say where he was because everybody knew where he was, but the 30 pieces of silver, when I did a lot of investigating, it turns out that was the price of the lowliest slave in the area at the time. So it was also made into a disgraceful thing. So, I believe that history is always written by the victors, and the victors in this case were the other disciples. And at the Garden of Gethsemane, when the Pharisees and the Romans came, that he was the only one who stayed. All the other ones ran away. And at the crucifixion, the Marys were there, some women were there, The only one unnamed. None of the disciples except for John were there, and none of the only other one who's there is an unnamed one called Jesus' most beloved disciple, and he's unnamed.
So you think that was
I believe
Judas?
It was him.
Wow. So Judas did this because it was required to fulfill the prophecies.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was, I believe it was, according to this gospel that was uncovered, it was all part of the plan.
Now,
If Jesus hadn't been crucified and that became such a big thing and then resurrected, he would have just been another prophet that came and went in those days, of which in Jerusalem and in Israel and the area, Palestine, there were hundreds of them.
so
It's all very, very interesting.
It is very interesting. Right. Now, you said you don't ascribe to any particular organized religion, but were you raised in any particular religion? So you had that background?
My family is Catholic, but not strictly so.
Okay.
We were always encouraged to explore all kinds of spirituality and meditation and whatever we felt was interesting.
But your knowledge of those traditions probably helped in writing this book.
Yes.
Yeah.
As I said, since I can remember, I've always had visions and seen things, and I was never, unlike other children, discouraged from it. It was always my family, my mother particularly, just made me feel it was a normal part of life.
You're listening to Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline, and our guest today is Linda Stasi, author of Book of Judas. Now, this was published by the same publisher as The Sixth Station, and
it's Tor Forge, which is Macmillan.
Okay.
Branch of Macmillan.
Right. And were you able, did you have a contract to write it?
Yes.
Oh, wow. So was that different for you, writing on contract as opposed to the first time?
No, because I'm a deadline writer.
Right.
So if I set a deadline for myself, or if someone gives me a deadline, it's the same thing. I just sit down and then I pound it out, because that's what I do. That's all I know how to do. The first one was a self-imposed. The first one was a self-imposed deadline, and this one was, a hard and fast deadline.
Right. And what's it like for you working with the editor?
Well, my
You're used
editor,
to that
Bob
too,
Gleason,
aren't you?
is a legendary editor. I believe he was one of the first people who bought the first Game of Thrones books.
Oh, wow.
And he believed in me when a lot of female editors did not believe in me. And the first time we met, we sat down at a restaurant, and he took out his tarot cards, and he said, "Let me read for you." And I thought, okay, I'm home. I love this guy. So he's been very easy. Although on this last book, he took me to task a few times because I was sloppy. Not sloppy, my story wasn't solid enough, and he told me, because I really didn't want to write the book until it actually formed in my mind what was right and what was wrong. So he took me to task a few times. And I'm not used to that, because when you write every day, either, you're not used to getting praise, you're not used to getting yelled at unless it's really bad. So, but then I took into account very carefully what he said, and I did a lot of restructuring.
Very interesting. Do you know where the plot is going when you start out writing these books?
I do, yes. Yeah. I do, but it wasn't until I got, I had a good idea of where I wanted to go. But there was something missing, and I didn't know what it was, and then I realized that the missing pages should contain the secret to resurrection. Because if anybody had that secret, whether it's a terrorist or a dictator or anybody, you could create an army of people who would never die. You would own the world. Control the world.
Sounds like the Night King.
Right.
From Game of Thrones. Wow. Well, it must be fun for you to be in such exalted company with your editor.
Yes, and Nelson DeMille, who's turned out to be a very good friend, has been incredibly supportive. And in fact, we're having all our book parties together.
Oh, wow.
Because we're published on the same day by different publishers. And I've managed to do something. I don't know if you know of Rayo's in Iowa, but Rayo's is a 120-year-old restaurant in New York. It only seats 50 people, and it's the only restaurant in New York that no one can get into. No one. It's just because it's booked up years in advance because nobody can get into it. It's a little Italian restaurant that's been there, but you can read it up online. I mean, it's just legendary and they've always been friends, and they're doing something they've never done in the 123 or 121 years of Rayo's. They're opening it for lunch for Nelson and I to have our book party there for 50 people.
Oh,
We're
boy.
going to have another bigger book party at the Yale Club, because Nelson belongs to the Yale Club, but I belong to Rayo's. Which is harder to get into than Yale, so there you go.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you
on Writers'
so much.
Voices, Linda.
It was great to talk to you again.
This is really fun, and great book. Can't put it down.
You.
I hope they make a movie out of it.
I do too.
Me too.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. I already know who I want to play Yusuf.
Who?
See this show on Netflix called Rake.
You know what?
Australian show. His
His
name is Robert Roxburgh.
Oh,
and I think he would make
Blake.
the perfect Yusuf.
Oh yeah, I watched that.
Don't you think he's a wise guy? I think he'd be a perfect Yusuf.
Yeah, he would.
Wow.
He would. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Mom, do you have some closing words for us today?
Yes, I thought this was good. This was Henry David Thoreau said
Okay.
this. Could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant?
Stay tuned now if you're listening on Friday. Have a great week, and also check out writersvoices.com, and see you next week on